Hello, welcome to this video from OMG Revision. This is a core vocabulary video for the topic, the challenge of natural hazards with a focus on tectonic hazards. The keywords you will see in this video will be used in your day-to-day geography lessons, in your revision resources, in the examination, and hopefully in your answers. So, the first keyword we're going to look at is earthquake. Simple terms, earthquake is when the ground shakes. For example, Haiti had a 7.0 earthquake in 2010 and it caused devastating damage. The shaking ground caused buildings to collapse and death of 250,000 people. A volcanic eruption is when a volcano explodes. It emits lava, ash and toxic gases, and again it can cause devastating effects. However, volcanic eruptions can also create fertile soil for farming and agriculture, so there are opportunities and challenges of volcanic eruptions. Physical processes. The term physical processes is just something that occurs naturally. In this video, we're going to be looking at the physical processes that occur at plate boundaries, but you can also have physical processes taking place on rivers, for example, a meandering Oxbow Lake formation, or the physical processes that shape our coastline. Think of cliff recession. Now, plate tectonics is actually the theory that was devised that says the Earth is split up like a jigsaw into a lot of tectonic plates. And where these plates meet at the margin is where most of the tectonic events and landforms are found. Distribution, not a word specific to this topic. Distribution basically means spread, how things are spread out. And on this map we can see the way volcanoes and earthquakes are distributed or spread across the world, taking note that generally they are found on plate margins. Plate margin. A margin is just where two things meet. We're talking about tectonic plate margins, and this is basically where the Earth's crust meets each other. Now, destructive, D is the word to damage or make less good. Destructive is basically when one tectonic plate moves towards another tectonic plate and it subducts below and melts. This is where the destruction is happening. Okay, as a result of this tectonic process, you're going to get ocean trench landforms, you're going to get volcano landforms such as this conical shaped volcano, and events are going to be earthquakes if they're under the sea, a tsunami, which is basically a wave caused by an earthquake under the sea, or volcanic eruptions. The next one is constructive. Construct means to make. What happens here at the plate margin is two pieces of crust separate from each other. The magma escapes and turns into lava on the surface and solidifies. It is constructing new land. Now, if we go back, if you imagine this side of this plate here is being destroyed, this side is being made bigger. Destructive, constructive. We can also say divergent plate margin because the two plates are moving apart. Conservative, nothing is being made, nothing is being destroyed. However, at a conservative plate margin, two pieces of crust are moving past each other. Over time, pressure builds up because of friction, and eventually you will get a sudden release of this energy in an earthquake. The word epicentre. The epicentre is basically the most powerful part of the earthquake on the surface of the land. So when you think of epicentre, think of middle, most powerful. Hazard risk. Now, I've just talked about earthquakes and volcanoes. These are hazards. Now, it's only really a hazard if it can affect people or property. Now, there are various factors that are going to increase the risk to people or property. For example, living in an LIC, there's going to be more hazard risk because the buildings are poorly constructed, they're more likely to collapse. The focus of an earthquake. So the focus is basically where the earthquake begins, and the focus is going to be found deep in the Earth's surface, directly below the epicentre. This is where the energy radiates from, and you can see these seismic energy waves or vibrations moving through the Earth. Subduction. Sub means under, like submarine is a boat under the sea, submarine. Subduction occurs when one piece of crust moves below another. So at this destructive plate margin, we can see that the heavier, denser oceanic plate is subducting below what is usually the less dense continental plate. Talking of plates and different types, continental crust is what we live on. It tends to be thicker, but it is less dense. It is also permanent and it is not destroyed. However, oceanic crust is more dense, so it's heavier. It's generally found underneath the oceans, hence the name oceanic. And when this subducts below the continental crust, it gets destroyed, so it's constantly being destroyed. But at the other end, when the plate is moving away from another, it gets rebuilt. There's construction there as well. A hazard, as I've already stated, is anything that happens that can harm people or damage. For example, if there was a forest fire, okay, and nobody lived there and there was no property, technically it's not a hazard, although it is going to cause larger global hazards moving forward due to the release of CO2 and destruction of habitats. Primary, like when you went to primary school before secondary, means first. Now, when there is a tectonic hazard, for example, shaking of the ground, a primary effect is something that happens as a direct result of this. For example, a building collapsing because the ground is shaking. So primary is something that happens straight away, whereas secondary comes after. So you went to primary school first, then you come to secondary school, sometimes referred to as a knock-on effect. So, because the building's collapsed, people are now homeless. Primary effect, because the gas pipes broke, because the ground was shaking, the gas explosion and fire was secondary. So that's primary and secondary effects. Now, when there are these devastating effects of these tectonic hazards, we need to respond to them. Immediately means straight away. And an immediate response is something that's done straight away. For example, if somebody's trapped under some rubble and they can't breathe, immediately you're going to pull them out and survive them, give emergency medical care. Whereas the longer term response usually comes after the immediate response, and this will be things such as rebuilding. So the houses have collapsed, you grab people out primary to save their lives. In the longer term, you rebuild the properties. Now, we can reduce the hazard risk of tectonic hazards in a variety of different ways. The first way is monitoring. You monitor something, you keep an eye on it, you check on it. And ways, for example, you can shine laser beams at volcanoes, and what these do is detect whether there's any changes in the conical shape, and if the shape of the volcano moves out ever so slightly, the laser will detect it, and that will suggest that there may well be an eruption upcoming. The other ways you can monitor volcanoes is by testing the gas emissions, as volcanoes tend to emit more sulfur dioxide prior to an eruption. The next word we're going to look at to reduce hazard risk is prediction. Ultimately, we can use past knowledge to try and predict where tectonic hazards are likely to occur in the future. So we're trying to look into the future, and this can help save people's lives because people could be evacuated. Protection, quite a common way of reducing hazard risk. If you protect something, you try and save it from being damaged in the future. So for example, this building has been protected, it's been made earthquake proof. By digging huge foundations into the ground, it reduces the chance of the building collapsing. You're protecting the building. They have also used steel frames with this triangle bracing shape to protect the building from collapsing. And the final one is planning. So if you plan, you decide what you're going to do in the future. In terms of hazard risk, for example, here we're looking at the tsunami hazard, tectonic hazard risk. If you plan to have somewhere you can evacuate to in case of a tsunami, you are planning for the future. Other things you could do to plan are get yourself an earthquake survival kit. So if you're stuck without water and food for several days, you can survive.